To live is to suffer. To survive is to find some meaning in the suffering. These are words by the 19th century German philosopher called Nietzsche. Over the past year, I've read a book called A Man's Search for Meaning, which I really think it's an important book for people to read from all walks of lives because it talks about history, it talks about human atrocities, it talks about philosophy, it talks about it talks about a lot of things which I really think it's going to open people's eyes to life. So, in this book, the author called Viktor Frankl was basically a Holocaust survivor, and he talked about his experiences in a Nazi camp. He talked about this new faction of therapy called logotherapy, which he created, and he talked about something which really resonated with me was suffering. And he talked about how suffering is in our daily lives, and we have to find meaning in it. And he a lot of times he quoted Nietzsche in his book, and his basic premise of this book and his basic idea is that suffering and making meaning out of suffering leads to a fulfilled life. Now you might be talking or thinking to yourself, saying, like why would I want to suffer? Because suffering is something seen as bad. I want to live a good life and feel good. But I agree with him, and I think it's really, really important that people suffer and do find suffering, a meaning in the suffering. So let's get into it. My name is Ziggy, and I'm going to be talking about suffering in today's podcast. I think it's a deep podcast. I'm not gonna lie. Like I was researching this, and I was like, oh my god, it's really nice. And when I read the book too, it was something that really changed the way I look at life. So yeah, let's get right into it. Every day we suffer in many ways. This could be breakups or your grandma dying or something as small as, driving in the highway and your car running out of gas, or I don't know, your parents yelling at you. There are many ways that we suffer in our day-to-day lives, and we don't see it as suffering. We just see it as we might see it as inconveniences or just problems, but everyone suffers in different ranges. So someone who might be living or just doesn't have a lot of money as this other person might be suffering a lot more. But this other person who has everything in life is still suffering. Maybe not suffering as the person, living 2 cents a day. But regardless, everybody suffers in life. There's no way or no life in which a person doesn't suffer. As I was reading this book, he found out that there were two types of people in the camps that he lived in these Nazi camps. And he found out that the people who were more likely to live and truly live life in a joyful manner were the people who found meaning in their suffering. And these were people, keep in mind, who were getting dehumanized, who kept, had to follow orders, getting hit in the head for literally like no reason, because the guards were the bosses and they could do anything they want without any repercussions, and they were basically just property. So these were people who suffered, and I mean it in the word, like they really, really, really suffered. But he found out that the people who lived joyfully, who lived their day to day in, a good manner, were the people who found meaning in the suffering, and there were other people who did not find meaning in the suffering. So I'm gonna break it down. So in the book, he talked about how people were looking forward to doing things after they get liberated from the camp. So let's say like a professor who was a Jew in these Nazi camps, he would think about, let's say, a lecture or a book or a report that he wanted to do after he gets liberated. And he thought about it in a way that was so captivating to me. So the people who found meaning, they'll be like, listen, if I get liberated from this camp, I'm going to go ahead and do this work or write this report or give this lecture that no one else can give other than me. I have the experiences, I have the credibility that no one else have. And by doing this work, I'm going to move society in a positive way. So they were willing to endure all the suffering and maintain hope that one day when I get liberated, I'm going to do this job, and I'm going to do the job so well that it's truly going to be my legacy, and I'm going to move the world, and it's something that I'm really passionate about. And these were the type of people who got up, they got hit, but they kept going. And life really, really, really was in them. Or it could be someone that says, you know what, I really love my mother, and when I get liberated, one day I want to go see her and tell her how much I love her or something. This could be a person who has not seen a daughter in many years and says, you know, one day I want to see how my daughter has grown up to be a young, beautiful woman, and just talk to her. So these are people who had goals in mind, and they thought about these goals, and they really endured all the suffering. Then there are other people who did not find meaning in the suffering. So these are people who basically lost all hope, and they let the suffering get to them, and they would get hit, and it's just like, oh, what can I do? I can't do anything. And the attitude really broke down. And these were the type of people who would perish, or who would die, and basically had no hope of ever attaining greatness, or actually surviving these camps to do something better for the society, for the wife, or for even humanity. And even after Mr. Frankel gets liberated, which it was very good to know. That's why I read his book, because he got liberated and he did many things, and many amazing things too, which is like really badass. Imagine living through all that suffering to go on and write books and do therapy and have an office and question people about our life and give meaning. Like that's truly truly badass. I don't think most of us would not. We would just be in shock throughout our whole entire lives, and basically just like kind of shell up and do nothing after surviving such horrible experiences. But after he left the camp and he did a lot of research on people, he found out that people who did drugs and were really depressed, they really didn't have any purpose or meaning in their life, or they didn't make any meaning of anything in their lives. So they would resort to drugs to kind of like cloud or hide that insecurity, or that gaping hole in their heart. And it really takes me to a story which I read about in a previous book. And it was this mother who the doctors told her that she was going to die in a very, very short period of time. But the thing is that she recently had a baby, and she made this pact to herself that, you know what, one day I'm going to see my baby grow and graduate college. And so she made this pact to herself, and this pact really put some energy and some life into her, and she endured all the suffering. She endured all the cancer treatments, the chemotherapy, the suffering, just to see her baby boy grow. And once the baby boy grew into a man and graduated college, she died. And if you notice in the story, like that was her main goal, to see her child grow into this man that graduates college. And it was something that she really stuck to, that gave her life. And it prolonged her life. The doctor said that you're going to die in a short period of time, and you're not going to see your baby boy grow. But she made this pact to herself, and she grew. And this is an example of finding meaning in the suffering. She endured all that suffering. She could have just said, you know what, this chemotherapy hurts. I'm going to die, and that's it. I'm sorry, I can't do anything. But instead, she took the hard route and endured all the suffering. And in the end, she saw, she was happy in the end, because she really fulfilled her goal. My baby boy is good. He graduated college. He's gonna get married, do all this and that. Then after that, she died, and it made me realize that a lot of people make this mistake about success, make this mistake about gaining everything that everyone wanted to gain. So people are like, when I get this big house, when I get this great family, I don't know, when I have $1 million in the bank account, I'm going to be fine. Everything's going to be good. But that's not true. In life, no matter in any socio-economic conditions we are in, we're always going to suffer. Listen, there are people out there that have the great house, the great wife, the great children. But guess what? Their dad is dying. Their mother is terminally ill. Their mother has Alzheimer's. They have depression. There are so many things that we don't see in people's lives, and when we see them in this glamorous light that, oh, they are famous, they're rich, they have the perfect body, we don't see what goes on in their head. Everyone is suffering in any way, shape, or form, but we just don't see it, and we tend to judge that this person has a perfect life. I would want this person's life. but it's never true. No, anybody listening to this right now, you're never ever going to have a perfect life when there are no problems or there's no suffering. You're going to suffer a great deal in life, and this is something that is out of our control. There might be one time, God forbid, where your child dies, or your mother dies out of nowhere, or you lose an arm, you lose a leg, or you find out you have cancer. And there's so many, like, life is just horrible that way, in which shit happens and we cannot do anything about it. And I really hope it doesn't happen, but hope this is something that we can never control. There's like, if you do you think the people who had cancer didn't like want cancer? I mean, they wanted to live a perfect life, but at one point in time they had this disease and it's part of their life now. And that's why I always make it clear that we should always be grateful for what we have, because we never know what tomorrow holds. And we're not the worst people living on earth, especially if you live in, like, if you listen to this podcast, it means you have internet connection. You could entertain yourself after this podcast. You could do anything you want after this podcast. You go to the park, do this and that, do this and that. But there are a lot of people on earth who don't have this option. They don't have internet access. They don't have access to food, access to water like that. And I see people complaining every single day about like the littlest thing, like, oh, they didn't get my Starbucks order right. They didn't get this right. Oh, Brad didn't text me back. It's been like 5 hours. I'm like, really, bro? Because there are a lot more people who would love to be in your position right now, but you're complaining about the like littlest things and you're crying over it. People who would literally cry because, I don't know, they didn't give me like my sixth chicken nugget. I'm like, it really bothers me, because when I read stories like this, like Viktor Frankl's story, and how he suffered a lot, and how he had relatives who died in the Holocaust, it was really an eye-opener for me on life, and it really made me appreciate the things I have, because a lot of people would like to have these, and I would persuade or tell everybody that they need to have goals in life, because as Franco said, the people who had this North Star, this book that they want to finish, or this person they wanted to see, or this goal in general that they had in life, they wanted to complete it, and it truly breathed life into them, into their body, to keep on going. And despite all the suffering, they still going towards that North Star. And you know what? They shot for the moon. They might not have landed in the moon, but they landed in the stars. And it truly makes them keep going. And I would tell everyone in this, listen to this podcast, to like find meaning in the suffering. So in life, I'm gonna suffer in life. You're gonna suffer in life. Your best friend is gonna suffer in life. But we cannot dwell on the suffering forever. We would have to find closure with it as somehow, some way, for us to keep living life. Because life is not easy. Living life, I think there was this quote I heard. I'm not sure if it was Mark Twain who said it, but this quote said that living life is bravery itself, because life is truly not easy. There are a lot of things that is going to happen that we don't want to happen, and it's going to happen, and it's good or bad. Some of us are going to have kids, some of us are going to be multimillionaires, some of us are going to, end up terminally ill, going to die at a young age. That's why I think it's truly important to be grateful, and just to really wake up in the morning like, thank God, another shot. I have my arms, I didn't go to the hospital today. I'm good. And finding meaning in the suffering, like, this means when you're going to work, I don't want to go to work. I woke up. But you know what? If I go to work, that means more money for me. That means I'm not poor. That means I could, buy my family food this next week. It means I could feed my children. I could do this and that, take my family to Disney World. So, you know what? I don't like this job, nor do I like my coworkers, but I know why I'm doing this. And that makes you more likely to do the thing. Or, let's say you have a terminally ill relative who is fighting for their life every day in the hospital. It's very hard, and I try to be cautious about this because it's something I've not really experienced, and I don't want to hey, do this and that, even though I've not experienced it myself. But I still feel like the lesson still holds true in any situation of suffering. So let's say you have a terminally ill person in the hospital, you could say, you know what, if anything happens and if you die, at the end of the day, you're in a resting place where you're peaceful, you're good, you don't, have to worry about your body aching anymore. And hopefully you're with God. And this is where religions come through, because religions kind of tend to plug in the holes and make meaning out of situations that we have. And that's why a lot of people tend to cling to religion. And that's what I found out too. Like in this Holocaust, there were people who were deeply, deeply religious and have mad respect for them, because it's really easy when things and shit just go south to kind of not believe in God anymore. And I have mad respect for those people. And I think anybody, regardless if you're an atheist, if you're a Muslim, if you're a Buddhist, you should definitely have respect for people who, and just in general, stick to principles that even when it's not convenient for them, they still stick to it. Viktor Frankl, he was devoted to God, and he prayed, and it was something that really helped him. There were many other Jews too that used God as a North Star, and they really, um, you know, looked up to him and prayed to him, and they kept going through life because of him. So that's something that is mad respect. So I think everybody, and I don't think everybody should find meaning in suffering in one way or another, in any way, shape, or form you're suffering and stuff. And it's not easy too. I'm not gonna pretend like, oh, this is easy. Just find meaning in suffering or whatever. But at least try to find meaning in any way, shape, or form. If you're suffering from depression, if you're suffering from PTSD, just try to find meaning in it and not give up, and just keep on going, because I'm sure there are a lot of people who would want you on this earth and want you to keep going. But yeah, this is it for this podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed. It's a really nice topic, really nice topic to talk about, and yeah.